Everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm your host John, and today here on the channel we're going to be talking about 2013's The Conjuring and its brand new 4K Steelbook that just came out. But before we get into that 4K Steelbook review, I always like to give a quick film review, and today is no different. So if you don't want to know anything about the film The Conjuring and you're just here for that 4K Blu Ray review, you guys can skip ahead to that right now. So 12 years ago, James Wan delivered us the first film in the Conjuring universe called simply The Conjuring. And this movie follows around the Warrens, who are real-life paranormal investigators, demonologists, whatever you want to call it. In this film, they simply want to just be called Ed and Lorraine Warren. And these are real-life paranormal investigators who actually investigated the Amityville horror case, which happened right here on Long Island, New York, and eventually would develop into a long-running horror franchise with, mixed results as far as those films go. The original one's an all-time classic, and some of the sequels are alright. The 2005 remake, got a soft spot in my heart for it, but it's not really that good either. But either way, or the original Conjuring would develop into an entire franchise, not just Conjuring films, but the Curse of La Llorona, the Nun movies, and then of course the Annabelle films, which the seeds for those films are planted right here in the original one, with very humble beginnings. This one is a very simple haunted house story. We're following around two families. We're following around Ed and Lorraine and their family, with their daughter and everything that she has to deal with while they're out there doing these investigations and helping out these other families. They have to worry about their family at home as well. And then you have the other family in this movie who's just moved into this old farmhouse that they bought at auction. They don't really know too much about it. They're clearly a low-income family with a bunch of kids, and they just have to make this work. The husband's a truck driver. He's got to take a rate half his pay because you can clearly see things are a struggle. And unfortunately, things are about to get even worse because this house, it's haunted. This is your classic haunted house film, and it's your studio release haunted house film. And that's one thing I don't think I realized back in 2013. And as my film fandom has increased and the more movies I've watched, and I've watched more movies with a critical eye, you don't realize this movie is really just checking a lot of boxes for the studio. They originally just wanted to hire James Wan. This was a studio project, and he was at the top of a lot of people's list, mainly because James Wan is the kind of guy who could start franchises. He started the Saw franchise, and then of course he would eventually start the Insidious franchise as well. Again with Patrick Wilson, who he clearly has a great working relationship with because he would also work with him on Aquaman. James Wan is just one of those great directors that everyone seems to get along with. A lot of studios put their trust to him, and that's how you end up with a great studio horror film like this. This, in my opinion, is still the best in the entire Conjuring universe, even though I do think The Conjuring 2 is really good as well, which is the other one that James Wan directed. And then it just kind of becomes these very generic horror films, where the Nun films I think are absolutely awful. Some of the Annabelle films are good. The Curse of La Llorona is it's not that great. But the original Conjuring actually had something. Yes, we have these big moments, set pieces, building up to these big jump scares, which will get under your skin, but the characters in this movie are interesting enough that, you actually feel sympathy for this family. You feel sympathy for the Warrens because they seem like generally nice people who will go out of their way to help this family. They feel like genuine good people who just happen to be these paranormal investigators, trying to help out the other family. But clearly they're interested in it, and a lot of people believe that the real-life Warrens are just con artists. To each their own. I don't really know. I'm not going to put any stock in it if they're real or not because I personally don't believe in this kind of stuff. But hey, what the hell do I know? I didn't make a career out of it. But the Warrens in this movie, played by Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson, they do a phenomenal job. They play very genuine, caring people. And when this family gets possessed, when the mother gets possessed, you're bringing in the perfect people to help take care of it and save this family and save the house because they really need to keep this house. That's always the big thing, with haunted house movies is why don't they leave? And then of course they put a couple reasons in here. One being the money, and then two, the demon spirit itself will actually follow them if they leave. So try and leave and they'll just follow you as well. So we really got to get this out now. This movie was filled with some of the biggest jump scares of the time. Obviously the one with the claps was used in all the promotional material, used in the trailers, all of that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of other great jump scares in this film as well. And of course, it's having the classic fake out jump scare that's going to be in there too. But it's very eerie. The whole film will get under your skin. A lot of it, I do believe, is the setting. This farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. It's perfect for these kinds of movies. There's no neighbors around. There are neighbors on the property. They make sure to point that out in the movie. But there's no one around. So anything that happens in this house, it kind of feels like it's something that's only happening to this family. It makes you feel like there is no escape for them. There's some great visuals throughout. You know, it's not a very gory kind of horror film. This is kind of like a horror film that a teenager can go see. You don't take like 10 or 11-year-olds or nothing like that, but like 12 years old on up. You know, this is the kind of horror film that can get, you know, younger viewers who are becoming adults into horror films. I just don't think it's as special as I originally thought it was 12 years ago. I think it's a very good horror film. I don't think it's even one of James Wan's best horror films. I still think that Saw and Insidious might be better than the original Conjuring now, looking back on it, even though I do think that this one does kind of get under my skin while I'm watching it. It's just I could see a little bit more flaws in it this time around. I could just see that it's a very, unfortunately, a generic studio horror film that's just above most of them. This one's still a very like solid 8 out of 10 film, but I used to put this more on a pedestal than I think it originally deserves, even though again I do think it's a really good horror film. It's just one that hasn't stuck with me as much as I thought it would, and honestly, you know, it developed into this long running franchise that, you know, I haven't thought it has been that great as I had hoped it would, but it came out during the time when the MCU was on top of the world and everybody wanted their franchises, and James Wan is the kind of guy who can make those connected universes, and of course he made the Conjuring universe, so it makes a lot of sense why they would bring him in. Warner Brothers clearly trusts him. He also eventually got Aquaman, and you can see it in all the interviews with him. James Wan just seems like one of those cool, down-to-earth guys that everybody gets along with, and of course that's the kind of guy you would want running one of your studio universes. It's just the film itself, I don't think it's elevated to some of those other great horror films that have come out in the last 20 years, like Hereditary. I don't think it hits those kinds of levels that Robert Eggers and Ari Aster are putting out. I think he's kind of like on that B+ tier just because he works too much in the studio system and there's too many guardrails there. But either way, or it is a really good film. I can definitely recommend it if by chance you haven't seen The Conjuring. It's just not one of those all-time great horror films that I used to kind of think it was. I thought it was hovering there, but it just doesn't hit those levels now. But I can recommend the film. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. I'm sure it's on HBO Max right now. But maybe you want to check out this 4K Steelbook that we're going to talk about right now.
The Conjuring.
Well, here it is, the 4K Steelbook for The Conjuring. There was also a standard release, and when I first saw this 4K Steelbook, I wasn't impressed with it. And then when I got this one in my hands in person, I'm still not impressed with it. This is a very, very, very lazy release. It's just the original movie poster, you know, with the clapping kind of engraved into this matte finished black Steelbook, and I don't know. I just think it's extremely lazy in my opinion. I don't really like it. When you come inside, there's some interior artwork, one 4K Blu-ray disc, no Blu-ray disc packed in there. You know, that's usually the standard for Warner Brothers now. All of your extras are going to be on that 4K Blu-ray disc. And if you're an extras junkie like me, there are actually 2 new extras on here that could have been edited together into one 13-minute extra, kind of looking back on some of the biggest scares in the film and just looking back on the film itself, you know, with interviews from, you know, most of the people involved with it, which makes sense. You do get Patrick Wilson, Vera Farmiga, James Wan, one of the kid actresses. So for the most part, you know, they did sit down and look back on it, but it's just like Constantine, where it's not really a huge looking back like you would hope. It's more like, hey, these are just little featurettes and we're going to add them on top of the other little featurettes that we had already previously released on the previous 2013 Blu-ray. Speaking of that 2013 Blu-ray, the audio track on here is the same DTS HD Master Audio 5.1. They did not go for the new Dolby Atmos track. They also didn't go for Dolby Vision. This is only HDR10. This feels like an old Warner Brothers release to me. Remember when WB used to put out 4K Blu-rays? They always used to put out HDR10. They never really used Dolby Vision. That's something that's only been happening pretty recently, where we've gotten those Dolby Atmos upgrades with the original audio. It could be that this is just a pretty recent film, and like the film elements themselves didn't really need to be messed around with, mainly probably because this film was probably shot on digital. It's a 2K intermediate, so of course it's being upscaled to 4K Blu-ray. It's a recent film shot on digital. It's not something that's going to, you know, need to be messed around with or anything like that. Even when it was put back in theaters, it was a 2K format. So this is the first time it's actually been upgraded to 4K Blu-ray with high dynamic range. And for a lot of people, the 2013 Blu-ray was really good. So it's just taking that same exact file, upscaling it to 4K Blu-ray, adding some high dynamic range to it, and that's how the visuals look in this film. Now, I haven't owned The Conjuring, so for me, I have nothing really to compare it to. I imagine, though, it's not the biggest upgrade in the world. It's just kind of, you know, it's probably just straightening out some things, clearing up some things, you know, hitting the deep blacks, because they really do hit the deep blacks in this movie. That's one thing I do have to point out with the 4K Blu-ray. The high dynamic range is doing its job. It's just, it's not a 4K Blu-ray that's going to blow you away. It does feel like, to me, an old Warner Brothers release, a cash grab release, unfortunately, with some effort put into it. It's just if you're me who's been talking about some of these great Warner Brothers releases that have come out since last November, like the Terminator, the Clint Eastwood 4K Blu-rays that came out earlier this year, where they were giving us so much more. Like they're using the studio that Arrow Video uses, fidelity and motion, so they kind of felt like Arrow Video releases light. Warner Brothers, for some reason, just gives us some of the worst packaging out there. But other than that, their discs themselves have been fantastic lately. This is the first time in a while I've been disappointed with a Warner Brothers release, and it just feels like this was a straightforward cash grab release. Look at the date when this is coming out. It's coming out right at the end of August, right before The Conjuring Last Rites, which is supposedly the last film in the Conjuring universe. I don't believe that. It'll be coming out on September 5th, I believe. So this 4K Blu-ray, I believe, is to promote the new Conjuring film coming out, and not necessarily to give the fans of the Conjuring universe or fans of the original Conjuring the 4K Blu-ray release that it deserves. This very much is like, hey, let's get this one out there. They clearly didn't put that much effort into the artwork, which, of course, classic Warner Brothers when it comes to the artwork. They just reused the same audio track, which is good. I gotta be clear about that. The audio track is really good. I just can imagine what Adobe Atmos track would have done with, like, better heights, but it's mixed very, very, very well. Stuff comes out, it's a 5.1, so if you do have a surround sound system available to you that is capable of, doing 5.1, you'll appreciate the audio track. It is still really good. I can understand why they might not upgrade it to Dolby Atmos, but I don't think that's the reason they didn't upgrade it to Dolby Atmos. I just think we'll just upgrade this, add HDR to what we already have, and that's it. Put it out there. Shoot some new interviews. It'll be cheap, and that'll be it. And it'll promote our new Conjuring film that's coming out. Feels more like a business decision release than it feels like, let's get this one out there for the Conjuring fans. And that really does disappoint me, because I do really like the Conjuring film. This time around, though, I didn't enjoy it as much as I used to. I think I've seen too many movies, and this horror film feels a little too generic for me, checking a lot of boxes, trying to appeal to a mass audience, instead of giving us, this all-time great horror film. Even though it's filled with great performances, great sets, it's a very good horror film. It just doesn't quite hit that, like, 10 out of 10 area that you would hope. And this 4K Blu-ray did let me down a little bit, but it's not a complete failure. If you're somebody who has the previous releases on Blu-ray, I would probably say, you know what, you can hold on to that. Don't upgrade to the 4K Blu-ray. But if you're like me and you've never owned The Conjuring on 4K, then this probably will appeal to you the most. Definitely more than other people who already have it, who already have the entire Conjuring universe on Blu-ray. Do you need to go out of your way to upgrade to 4K Blu-ray? I don't think necessarily. It's just going to come down to, do you love The Conjuring? Are you a big fan of the Conjuring universe? Are you looking forward to the sequel? Then you're probably somebody who would want to grab this on 4K Blu-ray and have it in your collection. For me, I'm glad I have it just because I hadn't had it, but I definitely would have waited for a sale with this one. I would have preferred that. So if I was going to give this one a score of 1 to 10, I would give The Conjuring on 4K Blu-ray an okay 6.5 out of 10. But that's going to do it here for me on another episode of Let's Talk. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video if you could. We also have channel membership, so if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel like Harvey Scott, Ben Rondo, and John Doe Juggalo, you could do that. Or you could even become a channel director like Kevin Kruger, Nicholas Head, Uncle V, Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews, and of course, Stone Gasman. Or you can even bump it up to the channel bankroll members like Mr. Smelly Potato. But of course, guys, if you have no money to throw my way, don't worry about it at all. I just hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.